Welcome back to Pastor Plek's podcast. I'm your host, Pastor Plek, and I've got two amazing women with me today to talk all things faith, culture, and everything in between. I've got Chelsea McCown, our famous women's deacon. You should be very excited about that.
Famous.
Yep.
So excited.
Very famous, like podcast famous. There's nothing better than that.
Yeah.
And then back once again, because of
keep coming back.
the crowd's clamor, is none other than Megan Dzialo. Thank you, Megan, for showing up.
You're welcome.
Thanks for coming to work today. All right, so what I would love to talk about is, well, what we talked about on this past Sunday, which is suffering of the cross specifically and why it is so offensive. And there's this like reality, like whenever Jesus presented the idea to the disciples, Peter in particular, he says, listen, the Son of Man is going to be, he's going to suffer, he's going to be rejected, and he's going to be killed by the leadership of the Jewish nation. And then 3 days later, rise again. But for some reason, Peter and probably the rest of the disciples just didn't key in on the rising again, dying part. They keyed on the suffering, the rejection, and death. And so why is that so offensive? And I'm going to kind of give you this, is that I think that's offensive because I feel like most people think we get what we deserve. In fact, there's a biblical precedence for that. You reap what you sow, and that is karma. But I feel like we need to understand the difference between karma and grace. And so I'm going to throw this out to you. I know you've prepared very much for this show.
Oh, yes.
Talk to me about karma, Chelsea, and then let's talk about grace.
I think karma is where we all lean initially. We get that we mess up. We get that other people mess up. We want them to get what they deserve, right? We tend that way.
And on the flip side, I think we think we're not that bad. Yeah. And so we deserve good things. And Jesus, this is why Peter goes, no. Jesus, bad things are, like, we need to keep, you are perfect. You literally are perfect. So good things are in store for you. Megan, what do you have to think about that or say about that?
I think I lean more towards karma for sure.
I think that's naturally the progression. And really, karma is a Buddhist, Hinduistic belief system that says what you do now, the fate of your future is dependent on what you do now. Meaning, when you come into your next life, you're going to be reincarnated into another being, and based upon how you did with this life, it's going to be better or worse, which puts a lot of fear into the way you live. Because if you screw it up and your bad outweighs your good, then you are going down a level. And so if you were like
You're gonna be a worm.
a slave, now you're going to be a grasshopper. But if you do better than you are, then you do it now. You get to be
works-based.
Yeah, it's very
Works-based.
works-based. Okay. Then on the flip side of that, I think there's this view of we Christians, and this is just probably Christians specifically, because of what Jesus did on the cross for us, we deserve, in fact, we should demand good things from God. And some call that prosperity gospel, which is because of what Jesus did for me on the cross, God will always give me material, spiritual, emotional blessing. And if I'm not obtaining that, there must be something wrong with me, particularly my faith. How do you respond to that, Chelsea?
I think this is a coping mechanism for people. It's because they don't want to deal with suffering, or if they're going through suffering, they want to have control to be able to remove it. They're like, if I do something better, what can I change? How can I, they don't like what's going on. They want to cope with the fact that there's suffering in the world. They can't reconcile the understanding of a God who lets bad things happen, right? Like they can't understand that. And so they're like, well, it just must be something I'm doing wrong. I can fix it.
Yeah, love that. Megan, have you seen the prosperity gospel? Maybe no one would put the word, because I think that's got such a negative label. But where have you seen maybe the prosperity gospel lived out accidentally in maybe in the lives of friends you know, people you know, or just in general through culture?
Oh gosh, accidentally.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think.
Like the name it, claim it.
Name it, claim it stuff. But I think people are like, I'm going to speak into existence. Now, they wouldn't say that. Like, don't talk negative. Like, I think there's a reality. Now,
I think people like to give a reason as to why good things are happening to them.
Right.
Instead of just like, wow, I don't know why, this must be the grace of
I
God.
mean, I feel like
I think we love to make connections. We want to know the why. We want to, I got
in mom world in general,
a bonus or something.
Isn't there a sort of like a reason why like your kids aren't sleeping, or like, you know, you don't have a faith for it, or like, you know, like, I mean, I just can imagine that you've kind of had that sort of like maybe guilt or shame or whatever sort of maybe put on you as a mom by someone intentionally just like you just need to, and then you kind of fill in a spiritual thing that's going to solve your circumstantial problem.
Yeah, and I think that speaks more to the first one, we get what we deserve in karma. Like, oh, my kids aren't sleeping because I'm just not a good parent. And or my kids are sleeping because I'm such an awesome parent and I have been paying attention to our schedule and I'm just paying attention to all their needs. And so I think that's how I tend to
in
function.
my like early parenting years with non-sleepers, because that was just brutal. It was like, you must not be praying enough. You don't believe enough. Right. Like, you know, clearly if you would, if you were, you know, praying over the bedroom, if you were anointing your kid's head with oil, if you were doing all of these things, and trust me, we did everything at that point. You're willing to try it all. It doesn't even matter. Yep. Then God will act. And I think what happens, that's called magic. You know, when you say like, if I do this ritual incantation, if I say this prayer, then the thing is going to happen. That's not faith in Jesus's goodness. That is an illusion of control that if I do, then you must, and that's the prosperity gospel in a nutshell.
It's a coping mechanism, you know, like to not be willing to deal with suffering.
Right, and so I think that most people, if we're honest, they ping between karma and prosperity gospel. Like, you get what you deserve, you should feel guilty, or in the flip side of that karma, you're probably not praying enough, you're not getting what you demand because you're not demanding it, or you're demanding it wrongly. And I think that's the part of the problem that gets people wrecked by their faith, because the thing that Jesus calls Christians to is, if anyone would come after me, he must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. And whether you are a man or a woman, a parent or not, a husband or single, wife or single, you're going to encounter denying yourself intentionally. And I think for a lot of Christians, when we think about denying ourselves, we think about gains. I'm denying myself now so that I'll gain something later. And usually people are, you know, I just think of like, I'm going to lose weight, or I'm going to get stronger, I'm going to get richer, I'm going to say no to something now so I can get something later. And that, you know, I'm going to say no to immediate gratification so I can get gratified even more later. I think that's where most people go. But when it comes to the Christian faith, it's not that you might even see the promises of God fulfilled in this life, as all of Hebrews 11 would attest to, but you are going to see great gains in the life to come. Tell me, and I just want to just hear from your guys' perspective, because I feel like I really respect your guys' faith and your leadership within your own family and the leadership within our church. Like, how do you prevent yourself from going to karma or prosperity gospel in judging other people's lives, or even judging your own life?
I think what keeps me from judging other people's lives is just the experiences that I've had in suffering. Like, I've come through suffering, and now when I look back on what God has done through that, and I'm able to look at other people and say, you know, God is putting them through this, and there's going to be good on the other side of this, because I've personally been through this, whether it's a choice that I made that had consequences that I had to learn through, or it's just something that I was put through and it wasn't necessarily a consequence. It was just something that happened in my life that was difficult. I just have a whole lot more grace for other people, knowing how difficult it was being in that situation,
and I think
but
that's
also seeing the blessing on the other side of that. Then I start to believe for other people too, like there is blessing, there is, you know, purpose on the other side of this. And let me speak into that rather than just the judgment of what you're going through.
Man, that's so good. Because I do feel like there is great, the healing of the gospel, of really focusing on that as opposed to the current circumstance. Then when you sort of come through the valley, then you're able to look around and get a kind of, I always say like, the mountain is where you get vision, and, you know, you can hear from God. Right. The valley is where you grow. And so when you have an experience in the valley and there's really great growth, and you're able to sort of come out of that, you're able to use the wisdom that God's given you to affect the lives of other people. And I think you do a really great job with that. I know at least my own wife, I think you in the circle of influence that you have, you're taking the testimony of what God has done for you, and you're bringing it to life and saying suffering actually produced something very good.
Something that your wife she kind of joked about this, but it's something that has stuck with me, especially during my season of anxiety, whenever I was just terrified that all these bad things were going to happen to me. She was like, Megan, you're not that special.
Yeah.
You're not that special. And I was like, what do you mean I'm not that special? But like now that I have been through in my 32 years, just difficult seasons, when I kind of have this attitude now a little bit, and when I'm in my healthy space, that if I were to go through and something difficult, or not if, when I go through something difficult next, I can kind of think of it as an opportunity of feeling special. Like God is going to use this really tough season, this suffering for me, and it is going to be not just for my good, but for somebody else's good. Like there is going to be redemption. There's going to be something that I eventually, hopefully, get to see on the other side of this. That's going to be really life-giving. That's going to have purpose. That's going to make me wiser. That's going to make me stronger. That's going to build my faith up. And so in some ways, I've started to shift from a karma perspective to more so this, well, maybe I'll get to be special again soon. Or when I do, it'll feel like
there's a nearness of God in suffering, right? Like there's just like this ability to rely on Him, right? It just, I almost sometimes look forward to those seasons that are just difficult and hard because He moves in them.
I definitely don't look forward to those, but I'm glad that you do. But let's talk about karma versus grace. I think that karma is you get what you deserve. Grace is it's your benefit at Christ's expense. And so I think that makes it a simple understanding is that you deserve you deserve the darkness that karma would bring. Like you have sinned, so therefore, this is the classic. Have you ever lusted after anyone? Well, then you are an adulterer, right? Have you ever gotten angry at someone at your heart? Well, yeah, then you're a murderer. And how many murders does it take for you to become a murderer? Like, how many sends you to prison? We understand that. It takes one. So you are not righteous, and so you need to get what you deserve, which is separation from God from eternity. But what God does in His great love for us is that He sends Jesus to the cross, His expense, our benefit. Now, Chelsea, for you, again, pinging back and forth between getting what you deserve and demanding good things from God, where do you find yourself, and especially as a mom of 6, as your husband has traveled a bunch doing great things for God and country all over the place, like how have you just wrestled with all the goodness in that of like, don't I deserve, and then understand what God's grace is on your life?
I think there's a lot that we wrestle with, like, okay, ask and you'll receive. But when we're asking for things outside of God's will, like it's so much, his will is so much better than anything we can ask for ourselves, right? That we think that we deserve or that we think is what's best for us. And there's just been this continual faithfulness for Him to show me after the fact why what He did was better, right? Like this ability to see after the suffering that there was purpose, there was a reason. And looking forward to that is almost a thing that like the suffering brings me near to Him. It allows space for Him to work in my life in ways that like I can't even imagine or can't even see.
Right.
So like that's why I say that I get excited about suffering. I don't actually get excited about suffering. Like it's I mean like
can't wait for that next season of the Valley. I'm really gonna grow.
We have a kind of a joke right now. It's Meltdown Monday with like what we're going on with school stuff and all stuff with the kids, and so. But every time that there's just this apparent, like, man, I don't have the capacity. I can't handle this. This is hard. This is difficult.
What's the thing that gets hard for you? 'Cause, I mean, you're kind of the superwoman that we sort of all like,
not at all.
Who homeschools 6 kids and makes it all happen. Like, what is the thing for you that like makes you realize you need God's goodness in your life, that you don't deserve it?
It's probably like just the needs. Everyone has needs everywhere. Yeah, everyone, everything. And I feel a very strong purpose that God's put on my life, in my family and in the ministries He's placed me in. Like, I feel the weight of those a lot.
I love that.
And just an understanding that, man, I mess them up every day.
Yeah.
And I don't know what I'm doing. And actually being like comfortable in that gives me an opportunity to really lean on Him. Like,
yeah, so let's talk more about that. Then you're talking about great purpose. Now, and this is where a nihilist, like this is where when Jesus is talking about, they're like, why did he poses the question, why does the Son of Man have to suffer and be treated with contempt? Why, and the disciples are asking, why does Elijah come first? And He's like, yeah, he does come first. And they did to him whatever they please, as it is written. Like, there's great purpose, but if you don't have purpose, then when suffering happens, it takes you to the pit of despair. And the only thing you can do is bring your own values, subjective worldview to the table, and at best sort of create an illusion for yourself that you have meaning that you created. And that's a difficult place to be, especially when, and I think this is what's really great for having a mom of 4 and a mom of 6, is that you are in the midst of such chaos, and you really want the best for your kids.
Yeah.
You really want them to be successful. But at the end of the day, you could say you're controlling it and you're putting all these different factors in, but that's really, I mean, the enemy has a say, is what we used to say in the Army. The enemy has a say. Like, kids have a say in kind of how they're gonna respond to your discipline, your training, and you could do everything right, and then they're off in lost land. And so how does that, without a value system that is objective, that God is in complete control and he doesn't let anything happen without a reason, I think it would be maddening.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you end up in nihilism because you've tried to fix things, you've tried to be good, you've tried to have control, and nothing's worked. And so the only way you can cope with the fact that like everything's on fire and you can't fix it, right, is that, well, then nothing really matters, right? None of this really matters. I don't have a purpose. There's no reason.
Right, and so I think there's a couple things in that. I know I keep going back to parenting, but I feel like when I have, we have 14 children amongst us here.
My goodness, that's terrifying.
Which is crazy. But when you think about that reality, if you without a purpose, without someone greater watching over this whole thing, it does make things seem silly, ridiculous. Why should I even care? And then getting back to your point, it does matter. Like, you are that special in the sense that you are the best mom for your kid. You are the best mom for your children. I'm the best dad for my kids. And so there is no better one. There isn't a better plan than Megan for Jack, or Megan for Nora, or Chelsea for Jean. I just, whoever you want to throw in there, like there is a reality that, you are the best mom for Jarvis. So how do you, in those moments, remind yourself of that, collect yourself, and then move forward without control, but walking by faith? I think that's the challenge for me, to not put fear over faith, to maintain faith over fear at all times. And so, Chelsea, for you, how do you do that with a proper view of suffering? And we would probably say we're not really suffering that bad in the greater reality, like circumstantially. But when first world problems. But the reality is you still struggle, right? And you still lose your temper. You still.
Absolutely.
How do you bring yourself to experience God's goodness, your benefit at his expense, when the chaos that you can't control is happening?
Elizabeth Elliot has this quote that is, you only have to obey today. I'm not saying it correctly, but it's like you only have to do God's will for today, just obedience for today in this moment. And so I think there's this level of depth of relationship with God that you're like, okay, what do you have for me today? Because all of this seems, like the idea of reaching all of my kids for the gospel, the idea of continuing to disciple them and grow them and train them up in character, all of that seems so overwhelming.
Right, and God has only given you faith for today. He hasn't given you faith for tomorrow.
Exactly.
And I think that's
stockpile grace.
Yeah.
That's what my
yes.
counselor has always told me. You need to stop
nice,
trying to
though.
stockpile grace. You only get what you need for today.
Exactly. And so you only have to obey for today. And so for me, that's this surrendering to, like, okay, Lord, what is it today that you want me to do? And it may be completely different than what I had planned. And that's a letting go of control. I think as parents, we want to micromanage and just make sure that we can do all the right things, but we don't have that level of control over our children today or their entire future.
Well, and I think showing your child that you don't have control, but mainly modeling what it looks like to be a child of God rather than a parent in control is huge. Because I think now after having 4 kids, I have shifted from this, I need to be in control, I need to be perfect, I need to show that I'm good and I'm authoritative and I know what I'm doing at all times, to, okay, they know I don't know what I'm doing at all times. It's clear, it's obvious, we're a hot mess over here. So let me just embrace that with them and show them what it looks like to be like, you know what, we're struggling today. Mommy's struggling too. We're going to ask God to help us. We're going to ask God how we're going to spend our time, or what we need to do next, or and kind of show them what it looks like to kind of be a mess, but to do that, submit yourself in your messiness to the Lord and what that looks like on like a daily basis.
Let's take a situation and apply these 4 different models of worldviews. So let's say the economy hits recession full on. Let's say, the church tanks, I lose my job, Jace, doesn't fly anymore. Grayson is now, he got fired from the police office. All right, so here we go. So everything goes back, right?
Okay.
So now you've got karma would say, you deserve that. You probably did something wrong. And so now you need to spend the rest of your life paying penance so you can do enough good to outweigh the bad, because your circumstance is probably because of something you did. It's like the classic, it's raining, and that means God's crying because of something you did. Yeah. One of my favorite lines.
Yeah. So much guilt there. Yeah, that's great.
Okay. Then you've got prosperity gospel, which says, oh, well, you clearly haven't believed enough. Yeah. If you had believed more, or maybe if you believe now, then God could restore what the locusts have stolen, because if you must have faith. And then if you are a nihilist, it's like, it means nothing. And so, oh, well.
You're screwed.
Yeah, you're just, it's
Enjoy
over.
the camper by the
like
river.
it's time to go move into the trailer park and everyone move in together. But the gospel of grace, what would the gospel of grace speak into that moment, Chelsea, just for you? Let's just take you for like your family, where you're at. I want you to see the gospel of grace speaking that when something bad would happen, where do you go?
We've lived this, right? Like, I mean, Jace left the Air Force, and we literally lived with my parents for 2 months with 6 kids in like a little 3-bedroom condo without an income while he was looking for a job. So we've lived this, and it was hard, like definitely extremely difficult season for me.
Someone could have said, Karma,
you guys probably didn't plan
very well.
And we just like ate through our savings the whole time,
Yeah.
But there was... what I know for a fact is that there is a purpose in all of it. And bringing us back to Austin, that's not where we were planning on settling. We were just going to stay for a short period of time with family. This job happened. I can just look back and see, that his purposes are so much bigger than ours, and that he can work good for his will. So
you've experienced benefit at Christ's expense, even through sort of a hard financial time season, to a place where you've seen God bless you circumstantially. Yeah,
and I can think of like 20 different things, right? Friendships, opportunities, like spiritual growth, things that have come out from that, just being near family, that if we had done what we thought was best, what we were pursuing, if we had really done that, if we'd planned better, if we'd had a job lined up before he got out, like all of that, we would have missed out on just the evidence of his grace. So not even that it's like, oh, we're so much better financially now. Or it's like, so, it's not even just the actual blessings, right? But it's just the evidence of his faith, evidence of his provision in every one of those areas.
Okay. So what about you, Megan, then? What if let's say, Grayson, something happens, there's like, a police thing and he gets fired for whatever reason. Like, where do you go in that moment of like, it's Jesus suffered on our behalf, but this is really hard. How do you overcome that as a believer? And I don't know if you had to prepare yourself for this, like in that fear, but like, what would you say, where do you go so you don't see it as like, well, we deserve that, or we didn't believe enough, or there's no meaning. How do you get to the place of it's your benefit at his expense?
Gosh, well, since you're talking about the police example, I mean, Gray and I recently had a conversation about like, let's say first day of FTO. He's just started field training.
Explain that.
Yeah, first day of field training, like you're with another officer, you're on the job, you're on the streets. Let's say the first day of field training, Grayson dies.
Yeah.
Okay, we have to go to these conversations.
So you have worst case scenario talks in your house.
What are you going to tell people about what we did, about this big transition from being a pastor to a police officer? What is your story going to be? What is your explanation of this going to be, Megan, essentially? And I was like, gosh, that's really tough. And he was like, because like we're doing this with no regrets. That's like my biggest hope, is that this is not like, oh wow, this was wasted. What was the point? This is completely pointless. This is we regret this, because that was not going to be glorifying to God and obedient to what he called us to, because we both believe that this is exactly what we were supposed to do. And so our narrative, not just our narrative, the belief of our heart needs to be, even though I may not even see the reason behind this ever in my lifetime, I'm going to walk forward and I'm going to choose to believe that God is going to redeem this, because I tend to think like, if something is so bad is happening, something like that, I wonder, wow, the story of redemption is going to be, it's going to match just how awful this is, and it's going to be so big. And I am going to choose to trust in that, because the alternative of trusting in that is just being hopeless.
Yeah.
It's being totally hopeless. And I would rather take a chance on a God who has proven himself to be good and faithful over time than just to choose to be hopeless. And so.
Yeah, so I love that. I think there's great purpose in all. One of my, Through Gates of Splendor, classic book, story of Jim Elliot, Elizabeth Elliot's husband. Like when I first read it, I was like, what a waste. This guy, guy had learned ancient Aka or close languages, learned the languages, and then dies before even
getting to talk to them.
And you're dead. That's it. It's like you got speared right there, done. Right. And you're just like, that was worthless. But I think Jim Elliot, that move back in the day prompted an entire missionary movement to follow him. I'm willing to give my life. I only wish I had, I think he wrote this, I only have one life to give. That's my only regrets. I only have one life to give. And I think that when you sort of live like that, it's so transformed. I'm actually listening to a book, Gates of Fire, think of Gates of Splendor, which is about the Battle of Thermopylae, which is, the Greeks and Sparta. And these guys want to go give their life for their polis, for their city. And it's like such an endearing thing, but for what? Eventually Sparta doesn't exist. Eventually, all they died was for literally nothing. But they were really brave, really noble, and they really believed in it. But when you have the gospel and it's for eternity, that means something. And so I feel like that's the kind of the heart that I think we lose in the busyness of the day. When it's the social media competition, when it's our lives have to, be, etched out to a certain degree, we miss out on the glory of God in our own lives to see that there is great purpose in the way we live and the way our actions are received, because we are leaving a legacy for the next generation of Christ followers, to which is why when Grayson put that to you, I think it was a great question of are you going to walk into this saying, I know my husband gave his life for the cause of the kingdom. It was a calling so that maybe went completely botched and the whole police thing didn't, even dying or the thing didn't even work out. But I want to see people following God's will for their life is the most important thing you can do, even if it is death, because even in death, there is great glory, not because you're going to be like some, in Valhalla, where we feast all day and we fight all day and we feast all night, but rather where we enjoy Jesus for eternity. And I think that's sort of the mindset that I think we miss out on when we don't understand that what Christ did for us was ultimately for our benefit. So any suffering we endure now, any laying down our lives and taking up our cross now is for the glory of God, and it gives us great purpose while we're living, or else you're going to be living in despair, or else you're not going to be living the true gospel if you're just living in a lap of luxury where there is no suffering involved. And I'm not saying that we don't, because we live in a first world problems, but I feel like that's where even here that you can move the gospel forward and you take on the struggles of other people to bring the gospel love forward at their benefit, at your expense, and we reiterate taking up our cross and following Jesus.
Amen.
Any other thoughts on that? I think we can land the plane.
That was great.
Hey, listen, thank you so much for joining us. Just grateful for you listening. Remember to click subscribe wherever you are listening, watching. And if you have any questions, make sure you text us at 737-231-0605 or come find us at pastorplek.com, where we love to talk faith, culture, and everything in between. And from our house to yours, have an awesome week of worship.